and welcome to the Painter Bride Quarterly Slush Pile.
Woo-hoo.
We're here to let you in on our editorial process by reading submissions to our magazine on air and having our editorial discussion and even voting right here. So, welcome and thank you for being here. This isn't new, sadly, but right now we are all remote. Everybody's remote in their own place, and we're zooming in, which is normal to be on Zoom, but not to every one of us be separate. So, apologize for any little technical glitches, or we can't really see each other's faces, and we have a lot of people in the room today, in the Zoom room at least. So I'm Kathleen Volkmiller, and I'm going to bounce it up to Alex in New York.
Hello, Alex J. Tunney here, coming in from Long Island, New York. Happy to be back on the podcast again.
Yay. So glad to have you.
I'm glad to be here, yeah. Quote unquote.
And let's stay in New York and go over to Jason. Hi, Jason.
Hi, I'm in Brooklyn. I'm on sabbatical. That's right. I turned in all my grades, and now I am on sabbatical as long as we all still have jobs. And yes, Zoom, I have to say, the rest of the world caught up to PBQ. Yeah. Now everyone's doing the same thing we've been doing for years.
Yeah. Yeah, so that's us, cutting edge, early adopters of wonderful poets and of Zoom. Okay, so let's go approximately 6,328 miles away and say hello to Samantha. Hi, Sam.
Hi, Kathy. Hi, everyone. I am here in Abu Dhabi, and this is my last recording from here because I'm moving to Dubai next week. So after 7 years, so hi from Abu Dhabi for the last time.
Wow. So, where do you think they like the Flintstones better?
The Flintstones?
Yeah, Dubai or Abu Dhabi?
I have no idea. I would think Abu Dhabi because it's more family oriented, more cartoons.
Abu Dhabi do.
The face Marion is making is wonderful.
And then I effed it up. Marion, I couldn't see your face, but I'd like to say hello, honey.
Hi, that might be my favorite joke ever. Thank you very much. That's the equivalent of John did this one too about like how you can tell if you have like, I don't know, scarlet fever or some joke like, and you basically take your hand and is it the size of your face? Do you know this joke?
Yeah, then you smash the person's face into their head.
Yeah.
You smash the hand into their face. I messed it up.
Into their face. So this is how John knew that he wanted to marry me, because I was like, what, really? And I put my hand in front of my face and he was like, oh my God, I really get to do this. And he smashed my hand in my face and that was it. Head over heels. So the Abu Dhabi joke is on par with that, Kathleen, and might actually have to be the title of this episode. Hi,
Abu Dhabi do.
Abu Dhabi do. It's Marion here. Heartbroken that Sam's no longer going to be my neighbor, but I think we'll make do Abu Dhabi style. But I'm bummed.
So hi, Mare. Where are you?
I'm sitting in my living room watching the sun begin to set here in Abu Dhabi. That's where I am.
Very nice, very nice.
Yeah, and I'm thinking of all y'all and missing your faces, but delighted that even though we are early adopters of Zoom, that we have moved to the visual, right? So now we get to see each other, right? Which wasn't always the case.
It's nice to see each other.
Yeah, it's nice to see each other. All right. Well, speaking of nice things to do, we've got poems to discuss. We have 3 poems, and you should see Sam dancing. We've got 3 poems by Charlie Clark. And what do you say? You want to just jump in?
I think so.
All right. So who would like to read the first poem by Mr. Charlie Clark? It's called The Beast I Worship.
I'll do it if nobody wants to, because I'm volunteering quickly because I don't want to do the next one.
No, I don't
Respect
wanna-
for you, Charlie Clark. I just don't want to read the longer one.
Charlie Clark, you got a long poem.
Yeah. I'll read the Beast I Worship.
Okay.
All right, go for it, Alex.
All right. Clearing the throat. The beast I worship. I light my torch and burn it. I am the beast I worship. Death grips, beware. The beast I worship doesn't blame the tree for its life expanding glamour, yet beneath a sky full of blue, kingfishers crying tears from the tree, the placard with its Latin name laid out in a lush calligraphy, and as many as he can reach, the narrow green articulations of spring, starting to feel their way into the air, before he finally takes leave completely. The beast I worship climbs in and sets the whole thing burning down. The beast I worship offers meek relief, but sometimes feels like beauty, sometimes feels like grief.
Thank you.
Bravo.
Thank you. Thank you.
I give you Zoom emoji applause if I could figure out how to do that.
There's a raise hand thing in the chat, maybe. I don't know.
I think it is. I think it is. There it is. I give you reactions. I give you reactions. I'm really drawn to the puzzles in this poem. And I have to say I cheated a little bit, right? Because I didn't know what death grips is. I just didn't know. I'm like, what is that, right? So Slushy's I'm as old as time and didn't realize that that was a band. So this epigraph is actually coming from the song.
What kind of a band are they?
Hip hop-ish kind of thing.
Say it louder, Alex.
Experimental hip hop is what the Wikipedia says.
Wikipedia tells me experimental hip hop too.
That's funny. I would have thought it was metalhead, hairband kind of stuff.
Kind of bridging that gap, but not in a like 90s way. If that makes sense.
Yes, it totally does.
It does. It does make sense.
Yeah. So right, that epigraph, like it does the opposite of steadying for me, right? It feels like a secret. Like the poem's got a secret. Like you have to know something about this band in order to crack the poem, or something about that song in order to crack it. So it also sort of like puts me on the back foot a little bit, right? Because I didn't know, right? So for me, to follow the poem is to follow the sort of the tumble of the lines and the tumble of the image of this address to this beast I worship, right? Which is the self, right? Yeah.
Yeah, that for me was kind of the important part of the epigraph, is that it reflects the beast back to the self, right? That the beast I worship doesn't blame the tree for its lithe, expanding glamour, and that's like, oh wait, but that's also you. Right. So there's like this, there's something really interesting, like in the song, like it's sort of like one of the things that happens in music is that things stand alone. That because they're supported by melody, you know, like if you try to recite a lot of Prince lyrics, like they don't really. You can't just recite them. They're not going to be good poetry for the spoken voice. And so you kind of have that moment here with the beast. I am the beast I worship. Like makes so much sense in a song, but then it's sort of reflecting, and refracting the beast back to the self. And so you have all these kind of like. And speaking of the '90s, you know, this kind of like Satanist undertone, right? This kind of like, you know, this belief that there's this like huge Satanist undertone to the US, and that all these people are practicing this kind of like covert child sacrifice and soul selling. And I don't know, did you guys watch the documentary about, you know, like when you sell your soul to the devil and he gives you the mark that you put on your CD so that you can like sell extra copies? Did you guys grow up with a lot of fundamentalist Christians? No, just me.
Nary one.
Okay, I'll be from the heartland. But yeah, this is so like, I mean, I really like the way that epigraph is working with and against the poem and kind of doing a sort of song work against a kind of poem work.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Well, I think that for me is also the way, it's going to sound a little nutty. It's almost like somebody's spinning the volume or like the speed, like toggling between like a 45 and a 33 in a way, right? In the rhythm of the lines, right? So the beast I worship doesn't blame line break the tree for its lithe, expanding line break glamour, right? So there's this like spreading of sound in the middle of the line and then the drop glamour. Yet beneath a sky full of blue, kingfishers crying tears from the tree, the placard with its Latin name laid out in a lush calligraphy, right? And now I'm into this sort of like this the sound, right, and the sort of play that he's making happen at the level of both rhythm and reverberation. And it's just like it's just a weird wonderful feeling, right, to be pulled through that way.
When there's also this like weird little Gerard Manley Hopkins reference in there, right? As kingfishers catch fire,
Exactly.
and kingfishers crying tears from the tree. That like the double stress of the sprung rhythm line with the caesura and the double alliteration.
Yep.
And I was like, well done, Mr. Clark.
Sounds fancy, but you know what I really love? You just put up rock and roll hands when you made the gesture for what the sound is doing.
Right. My effort to demonstrate the sprung rhythm line with the caesura. The caesura is actually the lowered middle. Yes, I have made the devil horns and the rock and roll sign in order to demonstrate. Gerard Manley Hopkins is spinning in his grave.
Is there a name for? Is there a form here that this lines 1 and 5 and then I think it's like, you know, it doesn't, there's not that much of a pattern to the rhyme, but there's a couple dead on rhymes, and then that, of course, that very last line is super on the nose. Right. We have, you know, blame, and 5 lines later, name, spring, thing, and then.
Wait, I'm counting. It might be a sonnet. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14. Yeah, I need like a, you know, like the air horn, like a pew pew pew. Like we need like a little, like when it's a sonnet, it's like pew pew pew. It's a sonnet. Pew pew.
If Joe were actively here right now, I'm sure he would start that for us. But that's pretty good. The pew pew.
Yeah, I missed my calling. I should have been an air horn.
My boyfriend did a quiz on Zoom with a bunch of his fellow architects like a week ago, and they got the question, how many lines are in a sonnet? And he ran into the room and cheated.
No.
That's awesome.
Quick, I know somebody who knows.
Yeah.
So
I'm actually appalled that they didn't know. Like my takeaway from that story is not the cheating. My takeaway from that story is, well, who taught them English? Some literature teacher somewhere has failed.
Yes, multiple.
Multiple times. Over and over again for their entire education.
Yeah. All right. So, but I think, you know what, this kind of comes back to the feeling in me of being both like in the territory of the familiar, right? Like that the structure is familiar, there's something deeply familiar, and then also sort of destabilized at the same time. Like it's sort of warping in and out as it's sort of moving into this reflection on the self, like self beast tree image thing that it's working through. Yeah.
Like I was thinking, like without, I'm gonna epigraph. I feel like I'm confusing two things. An epitaph, okay, epigraph.
Right. An epigram is by itself. An epigram is like a telegram, and you send it on its own, and it's a short poem. An epigraph is like a paragraph, and it's part of something larger.
Right. And an epitaph is a farewell.
Yes.
Because without it, I feel like the beast is like this abstract thing, and where's this poem going? But then I like what it does, where it's a reflection of the self, but removed. Because it's not directly me or I, it's this beast, but it is me because I put it up top, but it's kind of like a distance from it. And I feel like that kind of does that's something. I don't know what that something is yet because I haven't figured out how to articulate it, but it's something.
Good.
Oh, go ahead.
Oh no, because I was going to say it feels to me like it's very much about this kind of question of how animal or humans, right? That like the beast is a sort of we say the word beast to distinguish from person or from human, and so the poem is kind of in this space of nature, the tree, the birds, but then there's the Latin name, there's the placard, there's the calligraphy, and so like sort of nature, the way into nature is a human way into nature, and yet the human is natural, right? The beast, the human is animal, and yet it kind of like keeps reverberating back or kind of keep rotating around this idea of the person's place in nature. And so I was sort of really enjoying that part. I get lost. I mean, it's sort of like, it's a centrifuge, right? Like you're sort of like being spun out in all these kind of weird ways. But then, like we said, with the form, the familiarity of the 14 lines, the sort of like heavy 3-stress line, it does kind of keep you there and centered. But for me, it was really about this question of sort of like how beastly is human, how human is beast.
Yes, right, and that sort of impulse, like, you know, pulses through is this like impulse to life and generation and this burgeoning quality, right? That's even lush calligraphy, and right, this the tree, but then the sort of like the impulse to burn it down, right? Like the beast I worship climbs in and sets the whole thing line break burning down, right? Which is then called a meek relief, right? So that then goes to that final line, right, of the beauty and the grief, right? So that there's this really ambivalent, and I would say human relationship to natural beauty, right? That you love it and fucking destroy it simultaneously, right? That seems to be at the center of this too, perhaps.
And I think this idea is explored like in a different way very, very quickly with the French versus the English. And I think of French, and a lot of native English speakers think of French as like an elevated language, a more beautiful language, and English having more of a utilitarian purpose, utility purpose throughout the world. And kind of the same way we think of like man and beasts having this like, you know, I think of oxen or, you know, water buffalo or something who we put to use for the labors of man. I really enjoyed this poem.
Well, team, I don't want to rush us, but Charlie's also submitted a second poem that is going to bend our minds a little bit and take some time. Do we want to keep discussing this one, or do we feel like we're ready to vote?
I could vote.
Yeah?
Vote to vote.
Okay.
I will not say anything this time. Call
well, okay. So we're doing it like this. Ready?
Yeah.
We're thumbing it? All right.
I don't know. I always get so nervous about this part because I'm so used to not seeing you. What do we do?
We see each other,
I
of
like the
course.
thumbs.
Yeah.
Okay. 1,
2, 3, vote. Well, look at that. It's unanimous.
It's unanimous. All right.
Charlie.
Poem number 1 is in PBQ. Thank you, Charlie Clark. We're worshiping the beast you worship. Okay, great. Okay. So
I
now
can volunteer.
You want to do it?
Yeah.
All right.
I know this is I go way back with Charlie, so I owe him a good reading.
You know what? Before we go any further, I think maybe that's worth a mild comment, right? Which is, you know, we read these poems that are submitted to PBQ cold, like there's slush pile submissions. So Jason didn't actually know that this was coming up for discussion until it landed in his inbox. And then Jason.
I've known Charlie since I was 19 years old. And I went to a party with a really, really dear friend of mine. And at the end of the party, they were dating. And Charlie, I don't know, we were both creative writing undergraduates at the University of Maryland. We all piled into his Volkswagen bus and went to Graceland for spring break back when you could do those sorts of things. you know, like he's a really good friend. And you know, off and on, we sort of like traveled in the same circles and here and there. And like he was a head waiter some years after I was a head waiter at Red Lip. I got to see him in Houston. I'm actually really good friends with his wife as well, Sasha West, who's also a really brilliant poet, and the author of Failure and I Bury the Body, winner of the National Poetry Series. So yeah, so Charlie and I have been like sort of in like the helix of poetry land since we were 19 years old. And we did not, I don't know if I should tell this story. If you guys get really mad about this, we'll edit it out.
Okay.
One Halloween, the Halloween after Princess Diana had died, Charlie is a redhead and his girlfriend Sarah at the time, also a redhead. And she was going to go as Princess Diana with mangled Princess Diana with like her heart on the outside, and he was going to be paparazzi. And I was going to be a surgeon and massaging her heart. And anytime we told people our like plan for this costume, people like we really feared that people would hurt us. Like we really thought that like people were so angry. We're like, what, did you know her? Like it was sort of like our dark John Waters sense of humor from Maryland. But we did not actually dress up like that. Although I will say that the winning costumes that Halloween were all Siegfried. From Siegfried and Roy, because he'd been mauled by the tiger.
Oh, by the tiger. Oh my God. Okay.
And Mother Teresa had just died. All of the winning Princess Diana costumes were Princess Diana and Mother Teresa holding hands. Those were like the couples.
My goodness.
That was the couple's costume.
Jason, I have to tell you something. My husband and I did exactly that. I was making Princess Diana and Don was a paparazzi.
I am so jealous. And and people thought it was funny, and people were like,
some people, you know, we got groaning laughs. Nobody was really like, that's wrong, you know, like nobody.
Yeah.
Really, people groaned, you know, but I had like a tiara crooked and
right.
blood and stuff, and I actually wore a steering wheel. I don't remember how that happened. I put my arm through it, you know. Like,
yeah. So this is clearly why we are friends. This is clearly we are all connected.
Okay, that right there. That before you start to read the poem. Wait, did you want to finish?
Well, I did. I wanted to say one more thing about our ethical commitments, which is that as far as I know, the PBQ rule of recusal has always been whether or not you feel that knowing the other person will cloud your judgment. That poetry world is so small that we often know each other and we often become quite good friends with people based on liking their work or through liking their work, or sort of like these things come together. Right. And so the PBQ rule has always been, if you don't think you can be fair, then you recuse yourself. But if you feel like you can be fair, like, and certainly, I don't want to say who, but I mean, there have been times when I've given a thumbs down to poems by people who I really like.
Okay, I thank you so much for articulating that, because in a way, for the slushies, right, listening to this podcast gives you a backstage view of how poems are selected for PBQ, right? And oftentimes there are just natural themes in the conversation. And this question of when to recuse yourself is actually an interesting one that often isn't talked about, right? Because sometimes it does feel like there's like an insider circle, and if you know the right people, you get your stuff published, right? But for PBQ, it really is a democratic editorial process. And so we're trying to be as like ethical and upfront about these connections as possible. And I guess that's the thing I wanted to say out loud too, which is, you know, the Painted Bride Quarterly as an institution, right, is in its own way, to borrow an image that Jason's been thinking with and writing about in APR about sonnets, it is a helix, right? Like we are so interconnected now for almost 30 years, like in the world of poetry with friends of friends, right? And then we're always taking new people into this conversation, and those connections are going to lead to other connections. So in a way, it's sort of like, you know, we are both the, I don't know, like the landscape and the map, both of it. We're just both of it, right?
Yeah.
In Marxist terms, we're the figure and the ground.
I'd like to just add too that we've had more than one staff for more than 20 years. And so we also have always made great use of that. If, you know, a dear friend of PBQ Philly, somebody who's even been in our reading series or something, submits, we often aren't the ones who discuss it. We would bounce it to New York or Abu Dhabi. And even, I'm thinking about, even very recently, Abraham Smith. I love every word that comes out of his mouth or his fingers. And I could, when he submitted to us, I could hear it.
Yep.
And I knew that no one on the staff other than me knew him, like, or who was at that meeting. I mean, not on the staff, obviously, but who was going to be at that meeting. And I was so glad, you know, and I was sitting there dying because I just wanted to like sell it, make sure they voted yes, you know, and I had to like sit on my hands, zip my mouth, and it got in, and it felt like extra wonderful because I would have voted with all fingers up, you know, and they still liked it. So that'll happen too. I even like tell the staff, if you're at a reading, go ahead and solicit, but when you bring it, you know, you might have to hush your mouth.
Yeah. Yeah.
Right.
True.
Yeah.
Okay. That's a sort
Right.
of true backstage moment for editing and discussing manuscripts. And now, Jason, over to you.
Address to that inept gladiator, Timorous. 1. Supposing the futility of language as a means of protecting oneself from harm. Your armor amounts to the skin of some very large dead beasts, yet you retain such glamour. If you don't know the word, that's because the Scots hadn't invented it yet. There wasn't enough enchanting mist strewn on even a rainy Roman summer morn to veil the parts your opponent hoped to hack from you. Had there been? Had a cloud become the air around you? Had you survived and done it in this way? Had the poets seen this and gone crazy, probably you still would have been stuffed back into your cage, fed no more gruel than usual by the mulch-hearted man who ran the place before next week's show where he'd charge double for all the people eager to see some new brute cut your meek gray swarm in two. Pardon, please, these aimless suppositions. Did you know glamour is only a corruption of grammar? This proves nothing but the impossibility of any word's use to the dead. No word will build a door out of air and let you step safely through it before it grammars shut. 2. Concerning the awfulness of audiences across time. Should you somehow fast forward through millennia, it would likely be the sons of paper product scions laughing at your harm. They will be no less noxious than whoever watches you now. Before I waste our time trying to explain the value of flowered vines embroidered on what people wipe up grape juice spills and urine with, let me just call them rags. It is a sound so plain, I hope it makes sense no matter what the tongue or age. It's rags the audience throws at you. Not that they want to offer salves or congratulations, they simply want to throw things at you. And rags are the cheapest thing on hand. Were I to acknowledge that the word audience existed in your tongue, what would that matter? Except for how it meant something more like listening then, which means irony existed then too, as some hack-eared opponent hollowed out your mouth, and to slow the bleeding, you filled it with the audience's rags, the loosened red thread ends of some drifting in the wind from your mouth toward the lords drunk at center court, who hear only their own voices naming which next portions of your body they have paid good money to see your rivals cleave. 3. Cataloging some of what awaits him after the morning's dogs are done. Heaven is an archive full of friends whose legs have been restored. You can walk with them through the ever-longing haze and regather the other parts both they and you had scattered. Head and brains and arms and tongues and eyes, the eyes most especially, because there is so much now that you are out of the arena's daily dust and blight, out of the darkness of its catacombs. There is so much now for you to gaze at. It is worth acknowledging the Norsemen who would, drunk at sea some mist-decked century hence, invent the verb to gaze as a variant of to gape. What does not describe a wound exactly but does suggest a body breached, as well as it does awe, which in this heaven's tongue is infinite.
Great reading. Wow.
While everybody absorbs that, let me remind our listeners that you can go look at that. It was long to hear, I'm sure, 4 pages, I think. So you can go look at pbqmag.org at the poem itself so that you can get in it with us.
And that silence is thinking.
That is the sound of thinking.
It is the sound of thinking. All right, so I just want to jump in and say there's so much in this poem that I love, that and it is both in the style and the sound of it, but the content. Like I'm you know, full disclosure, I don't know if Timorous was or was not an actual gladiator, right? Like anybody, like, does Ovid write about Timorous? Because he should. No, okay, good. So, all right, thank you for being in there in that confusion with me. So the whole piece is called Address to That Inept Gladiator, Timorous, and then it's got these 3 sections. And the movement from like what it means for Timorous to be like in the battle, right, in the Roman arena, right, and then the second move, like switching to the audience's like preoccupations, right. I'm so drawn to that, right, and then the third, it becomes a sort of more like strangely contemplative space, right, of still brutal images, but a little bit more conceptualizing, right? So yeah, so I'm a sucker for any like audience study stuff, right? I know that sounds totally nerdy, but putting the reader inside, you know, this bloody rags and battle in the arena is pretty fascinating.
I love the way that it sort of is breaking down this 4th wall, right? That there's like this way in which it's telling us the story of this poor Scottish gladiator who's suffering these terrible, brutal events, and then this turn towards the language by which it's being told. And so there's this way in which like it keeps sort of doing this kind of like really ethical work of kind of bringing back the dead and the atrocity with a kind of attention to the way in which that's being brought back, and sort of the impossibility of bridging the gap. And they are also, I won't make this sound this time, but they are also each 14-line sections.
Stop. Are they really?
They are.
Charlie sneaking in the sonnets.
And that we were both Phyllis Levin's student. What can I say?
Oh my goodness.
The sonnet looms large.
Yeah.
But
yeah, that move that he's making too, the sort of linguistic work, right, and the sort of etymology of these words, again, it's part of that wonderful jarring between, right, the brutal image and the sort of philosophizing that's going along with it, and you know, then it's sort of, you get that sort of meta delight, right, of the commenting on the commentary about the thing being observed, right?
I love the last section so much.
Right. Yeah.
It's just
yeah.
To piggyback off Jason's thing, because breaking or going through the 4th wall, however you want to enter in that wall, is not easy to do, and I think he walks the tightrope pretty well. And like you said, Marion, just like the commentary, but the commentary is its own commentary in a way, because he's like, you don't care about this. You're you're dying. So forgive me, I'm making a point here, but sorry.
Mhm.
So yeah, well done.
So, Jason, I don't want to put you on the spot, but I'm about to.
There we go.
So Jason's got this wonderful essay out in American Poetry Review about sonnets and the sort of the spiral form that sonnets take, right? Sort of the helix spiraling that happens in terms of rhythm and sound and sense and concept, right? Rather than the sort of like more obvious juxtapositions of those in the forms that we know, whether it's Elizabethan or Petrarchan, right?
Yeah.
And one of the ways that beautiful essay really blows my mind is that it's also anchored into this notion of the sonnet as a sort of machine for the self, right? Like it is a mechanism through which the self is being performed, right? And I think that's why these poems really just like enchant me and fascinate me, because it's an address to a performer. It's an address to an actor, this poor inept gladiator, right? And so like my eye is on this like suffering gladiator, but my mind is around the speaker. Like it's this, so the subject, so here's me putting Jason on the spot. What do you make of the way the subjectivity is being performed in this sequence?
Well, okay. So if I have to put on like my scholar hat, yeah, I mean, sort of the commonplace about the sonnet is that and it's true. I mean, I don't say commonplace to dismiss it, but I sort of say commonplace is like, sort of what everyone knows about a sonnet, is that it inaugurates modern subjectivity and it inaugurates the divided self, and that the sonnet with the octave and the sestet, or with the douzaine and the couplet, enacts the divided self, and so that the conflict can be internal rather than externalized. That if we're talking about medieval poetry, the aspects of the self are distributed across allegories. So there'll be someone who represents this aspect of you and someone who represents that aspect of you, but the subjectivity remains singular. And then in the sonnet, you can have all of these confusing, you have depth, right? You're confusing, like you don't make sense to yourself. You have to explore, you have to reconcile, you have to figure out. And so the argument I was making in that essay is that we often think of the turn as kind of this shift, right? We start with the octave doing this, and it sets up a riddle, and it answers it in the sestet. Or there's one speaker here, and there's another speaker here. There's a paradox that's synthesized. And so what I was noticing was that there are a number of sonnets that actually kind of intensify, and I think these do that same thing. And if you're looking for the sort of divided self, it's yeah, right? I mean, it's there. The self is simultaneously aware of the inadequacy of language to describe the brutality of the situation. That in reading about this poor, unfortunate gladiator, and there is a kind of statute of limitations on atrocity, right? There is a kind of way in which the fact that this happened in the Roman conquest of Britannia, prior to 800, we're sort of like, it happened a really long time ago. We're not quite as sensitive to it as if we were speaking about, police brutality in Georgia, or police brutality in St. Louis. And so these poems, I think, in terms of like what they're doing with the sonnet form, one, there's that play in subjectivity that is both identifying with the gladiator and sort of observing it from a distance. Mm-hmm. There's a deep attention to the way in which the self is divided between the story and the language in which the story is told. And both of those things kind of intensify to ultimately create what I think is tenderness.
Right.
I think what happens in the last poem, or in the last section of the poem, is that Clark, by placing Timorous in heaven, and I don't know, like, are we all, does everyone remember the first episode of The Simpsons where Bart Simpson drives the Sunday school teacher crazy by asking about like what's in heaven? right? That your pets aren't in heaven. Like, what if you were an amputee and you go to heaven? Is the arm waiting for you? Yes, Bart. And then it's a whole, it's like, but it's actually like, I mean, part of the joke is that people do spend a lot of time thinking about these things, that Bart is driving the teacher crazy by asking and sort of taking to a point of absurdity. But Clark is kind of doing the same thing, and by bringing it to heaven, and sort of restoring his body and restoring his eyesight, he's simultaneously, kind of calling attention to just the sheer atrocity of the gladiators' life and abuse, but then also restoring it at the same time. And then that connection between gaze and gape, right? And that the gaping wound is etymologically related to the word gaze. I think it's gorgeous. I really like it. Is that like enough?
Yeah, right. I have one more thing I want to say in addition to what you just said, but Alex is trying to get in.
Oh, no, because I have a dumb thing. I may need a buffer in between that brilliant thing and what I'm going to say. So if you want to say something smart, do it now before I
I love how Jason's like, oh, everybody knows this stuff, so let me just recap, right? And I'm like, holy shit, like, if I ever knew that about sonnets, right? Like, I feel like the sparkles in my brain must be visible to you all. Thank you, Jason Schneider. The one thing that I wanted to say, because Jason's helping me see it, right, is that there's this way in which the speaker of these poems, right, is moving from audience, like acknowledging his own position as audience and author, right? So the pair there, like the bonding between the speaker as author and also as audience. So the middle poem, the awfulness of audiences across time, I can't help but feel like the speaker is condemning himself as well, which has been sort of like the self-deprecation the whole way through. And so the tenderness works like 20 different ways in the last movement, because it's tenderness towards Timorous, but also towards the author as remaker, right? Or the person who can tell and reconstitute, right? In a way of deepening and dignifying, or that's, so I wasn't able to sort of see that as clearly until Jason helped me.
That's beautifully said.
So we keep on calling the gladiator Timorous, and I'm wondering now that, like, I looked up the word timorous, that is it like a pun or a play on words, or because like
it's a bad name for a gladiator.
Yeah, exactly, because timorous, for those who aren't looking it up on Google by themselves, is showing or suffering from nervousness, fear, or lack of confidence.
Yeah.
So I don't know if would somebody be named Timorous, or if it's a little twinge in the title, like he's phrasing it a certain way, like this nervous, inept gladiator, or any like that the word maybe sounded like somebody's name at that time. So I just thought it's funny that, like, is this guy's name Timorous or not?
But I'm with you. Like, I actually went deep Google thinking, like, was there somebody, because it sounds like it could be a character name, right? Which is part of the beauty of the joke in the poem, I suppose, or the humor in the darkness. But yeah.
When you looked up Timorous, what's the etymology of it?
Oh, good call. Because
it looks, I mean, I only know it from a Robert Burns poem, which is in like sort of that Scottish dialect, we carrying timorous beastie. So I was just wondering, because obviously, I mean, the gladiator that he's talking about is Scottish, that he's been sort of kidnapped and he's been enslaved from the Scots.
So I'm looking at the origin. It's going Latin temere, to fear, timor, to fear, both Latin. Then medieval Latin is timorosus, and then Old French timorosus, and then late Middle English is, we get to that.
So it's definitely a Latin word. So it's coming in with the Roman and invaders, occupiers.
Etymology with PPQ.
I love etymology. I always thought if I didn't go like the writing way, I would have been a linguist and studied etymology. It's fascinating.
Have you guys all read Owen Banfield's History in English? What's the Owen Banfield book called? History in now I'm looking it up.
All right.
History of English in something words. Oh, I meant Owen Barfield. History in English words. But I don't know. I mean, I love I love what Charlie is doing in the poem, in part because, like, I mean, I like etymology, but I don't think that there's some like deep ancestral, like when people are like, well, this word comes from that. And it's like, well, if you didn't know that, then it's not meaningful.
Right.
I mean, like it's not cosmic. Like language isn't, like metaphysical and kind of carrying with it. Like if you look for it, you can find it. But like that's not the same as, the sort of like, well, this really means that. Sort of, I don't know. I stopped making sense like 3 sentences ago.
Yeah. Well, you know what, Kathy, to your point about etymology and linguistics, one of the things I always keep in mind when I'm reading through the slush pile is the poems that you love and the poems that you hate. And pause for a moment, right? That's like a crazy way of reading, meaning it's like, I know what I like, but I'm also like, is Kathy gonna like that? How's Kathy gonna read that, right? And over the years, you and I have often talked about your disdain for poems that are about writing poetry, right? Like that, you're just like, no, thank you, right?
Share. Strong share.
You too. Okay. All right.
I feel that way about a lot of contemporary books when the protagonist is a writer or
yes.
It kills me. It just kills me. I'm like, where's the imagination?
Sam, a lot of the fiction we get, no insult to all of our submitters, but so often the protagonist is a teacher or a writer.
Yeah.
Their teacher so often.
Yeah.
Write what you know. I guess they're following that adage.
Yeah. There's a great interview with Zadie Smith where she's talking about contemporary literature, and she says about how music is the middle class like testament to creativity, right? Like people can afford to have a guitar, and then she's talking about how like in this era of autofiction and like people not feeling like they have an authority to write outside of the here and now, we see this everyone writing in present tense, in first person, and not veering away from the other. Or I think that's even true of occupations. She didn't say that, but I think that's a little bit why this proliferation I think is everywhere in a way that doesn't feel the same. Like if you look back at Little Women and Jo March like wants to be a writer, like it still feels special then. So I think there's something different when I think about people as protagonists in the past who wanted to do this like rebellious act and write, but now I find it less rebellious and less interesting.
Snap. I think I raise it because what Charlie Clark does here is so weirdly fresh, right? And it is also very not, right? Like he's giving you the etymology of words in a poem that's also commenting on communication, right? So it comes really close to being the thing that would annoy the shit out of you, but doesn't. I don't want to put words in your mouth, but I'm not getting a sense that you're annoyed by this, is all I'm saying.
No, well, I for one am not at all, because it's just so well crafted and so the other thing that always bothers me, as I've said before, like when I can feel the author going, I'm so clever, and it has none of that.
Right. Yeah.
It's just really smart. I think this would be a great poem to use in a classroom for a million reasons, right?
Well, and the 3 sections are so similarly structured with the kind of that move towards the etymology, and they all have something really interesting to say about language that actually sort of like carries this kind of equal attentional weight with someone being dismembered, which is amazing.
Awesome. All right, I think we might be ready to vote, party people. Yeah?
Yeah.
Okay, let's do it. I'm closing my eyes. Somebody count.
1, 2, 3, vote.
Yay!
And it is with very little dramatic tension that I shall tell you. Unanimous, yes.
Excellent, excellent, excellent. All right, my lovelies. Thank you so much, Charlie Clark, for these amazing poems. I know Charlie Clark has a book coming out soon, I think,
From Four-Way. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Four-Way, right? I'm not sure that these poems are part of that, the what's being collected, but I just want to give him some, props and love for the book coming out on Four-Way, and we're delighted to have his poems in PBQ.
Yeehaw.
Yeehaw. All right.
All right. Does anybody have anything they want to say? Anything they're doing? Everybody good?
Okay.
All right. Well, we don't know when this will be released, so I don't know what state anything will be in. I mean, really, we're just all in the same place of not knowing anything at all, other than we're here. We're still doing this, and
I'm doing, and because I can't have a book launch because my book party can't be a physical party.
Yeah.
I'm scheduling one-on-one readings, so people can pick a 15-minute time in my day through a Google spreadsheet, and so I'm doing this individual book launch. So we'll see how it goes, and I'll let you know what happened.
Yeah, I think that's a terrific idea. Truly, and you'll do it for at least a year, right? As long as people want it.
As long as people want it and keep buying the book, I will show up.
Good.
That's awesome.
Sure.
Yeah.
Maybe that would be a great thing in your class. Teach a poem of Jason's and then have Jason's.
That'd be nice. Yeah, I will 100% show up and read poems and answer questions.
Awesome. All right. I guess that's it then. So Slushies, please tell us how we're doing. Follow us on all the social media platforms and keep reading. Woohoo!
Woohoo! Mwah, mwah, mwah. Love you guys. Thank you, Charlie Clark.
Bye.